Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, here to the Arena World Championship. And we've seen, honestly, this weekend has been a weekend of surprises, I think it's fair to say. In Europe, we saw some stuff. Now in North America, we almost see one of the biggest upsets possible. Storm narrowly defeated here by Never Lucky, but they will make it through. And now we're into the upper brackets. And now we're really here with the 4 teams that have been thus far undefeated in the tournament and are at the top of their game. Our first series will be the boys versus M2KC. And I really want to start by talking about M2KC because, of course, last week they beat the boys, they beat Cloud9, and they were looking really good.
Yeah, M2KC just looked like a team that can just beat everybody right now. And I think now that they've seen the strategy that Never Lucky implemented against C9, I think they can grab an even more convincing win against them if they should meet later on in the tournament. Of course, when they beat the boys last week, they used that Elemental Shaman, Assassination Rogue, Resto Druid, but they ended up losing with that same composition against Never Lucky, who played a similar composition to the boys. So I expect M2KC to be running that Frost Mage, Assassination Rogue, Resto Druid now, maybe tag in Rosita Jones on that Frost Mage because he had a really convincing win in a similar matchup. So I think that's what we're going to be seeing here from them on the blind. And the boys, they don't necessarily need to run the DK DH. They have a lot of options as well. DK Windwalker, they can tag in Thugonomics and run the same thing we saw from Storm as well in the previous game. So there's going to be some mind games here.
Yeah, there really are. And I think that's the thing to note is that the boys and Cloud9, both of them underperformed last week. And these are not 2 teams that will sit by idle whilst their, championship dreams fall away from them. In fact, the boys, Chun-Li was saying that he felt really confident today going into M2KC, even tweeting out that he feels like he's just going to play 1 series today, which of course would mean that he's just going to flat out beat this. We talked to him a little bit and he said it was just pure confidence. He's feeling really good about this series.
Yeah, and like you kind of mentioned earlier, we had a chance to sit down with Colo, and he kind of talked about one of the compositions the boys has been practicing and been doing an excellent job with. I'm not going to spoil it just yet. I'll save that for the blind pick. We'll see if that is what they decide to lead with in this matchup. And if so, I think it's a composition that is really strong, and if the boys can sort of channel its full potential, it could be a huge tool for them.
Yep, Jamili was the upset king last weekend. We'll have to see if he can follow through with that today. The boys with a new composition, potentially. We're waiting to see. This is the blind pick, so neither team knows what the other is playing just yet, but it is that new composition. It's Gurecki on the Druid, Chun-Li on the Windwalker, and Smexin bringing out his Shadow Priest. I could not be happier to see this, Sid.
All right, an interesting composition from the boys breaking out here against Mew Kitty Cats. However, Mew Kitty Cats didn't go with the Rogue Mage Druid. They're staying with their classic Rogue Mage Paladin. These are 2 compositions that go head-to-head maybe a little bit on the ladder, but in terms of tournament setting, we're still seeing a lot of different compositions despite 8.1.5 being around for quite some time. So let's see how this plays out. I do anticipate that M2KC got a bit of an edge in terms of the blind pick. The Windwalker Monk, a bit of a liability against this Rogue Mage Paladin comp, and similarly to how we saw the Destruction Warlock go down in Dampening, I think the Shadow Priest is a similar liability later in the fight. M2KC are going to start the assault with crowd control onto both Smexin and Gurecki, as well as Chun-Li now. Life Grip onto Gurecki, denies the Ring of Frost placed by Jamili. Well done from Smexin, denying that initial crowd control chain. Now Gurecki is getting aggressive in cat form, getting some extra damage onto Jamili, as it looks like the boys want to be attacking Jamili for the starting parts of this game.
Yeah, Jamili, Touch of Death is rolling for Chun-Li. Are they going to have significant burst damage? We'll have to see. Jamili looking to deny with the Dragon's Breath. Full kidney shot on Smexin. Smoke Bomb gets dropped out. And it looks like Rubcub is going to be able to save that Ice Block from Jamili. Jamili opting not to play the Temporal Shield, so a little bit more aggressive talents here in this particular matchup. The boys, they have a lot of defensive cooldowns still at their disposal, and they're making a big push onto Jamili. If they can get Ice Block through the Avenging Crusader of Rubcub, it would be massive. Gurecki into a Hammer of Justice. Jamili looking to set up some crowd control. Blessing and Protection helps him, but Chun-Li with a beautiful Ring of Peace denies Jamili any follow-up crowd control. Jamili charges in looking for the Dragon's Breath. Ends up finding the Polymorph anyways. Smexin almost goes down without using his Dispersion. That was a good play by Jamili. He got denied with the Ring of Peace. Ended up just charging in, getting the Dragon's Breath sheep by himself forcing out dispersion, and now the boys are in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah, M2KC are fired up here in game number 1, looking to make Chun-Li eat his words. Big hit attack once again. Smexon's defense is starting to crack if Jamili can get further polymorphs out on Gorecki, but Chun-Li shuts him down. Now Smexon looks to counter engage. Double Psychic Scream. Jamili is isolated and has to ice block. Perfect counter engagement. They mass dispel off the ice block at low health. Aggressive plays by Smexon to try and close this game out almost right now. Big damage. RubCub, are you going to trade out that Blessing of Sacrifice? He's just chilling with Light of the Martyr and Holy Light on 10% health. This is a bold move by RubCub to not trade a powerful defensive to stay alive, but he manages to get away with it.
Yeah, manages to get away with it, and that's big for the team of M2KC. They still have some of their powerful defensives. Combustion gets used by Jamili. That's a full Hammer of Justice on Gorecki, but there's no follow-up. Jamili gets caught in the leg, so now Gorecki's completely free to keep Smexon alive, and the opportunity has kind of been lost. Smexon, Dispersion rolling up in 15 seconds, that major defensive cooldown. And that's one of the difficulties about training down a Shadow Priest, is these defensive cooldowns, they rotate up so quickly. Dispersion, one of the lowest defensive cooldowns in the entire game, but it's just so powerful. It's really difficult for M2KC. They have to overwhelm the boys, force out multiple cooldowns at once, and that's when they can try to get a kill.
I mean, even if they don't, Gorecki's so much lower on mana. Another crowd control attempt here from M2KC nets them that dispersion very early on in the crowd control chain, so there's potential to even force more cooldowns from Smexon. Chun-Li stalls damage with that grapple weapon. We've been seeing a lot of grapple weapon throughout the tournament on the Windwalker monks to peel and also deny death strikes from other Death Knights. Of course, Death Strike not going to be a part of this game, but more oriented at survival. Smexon being taken down here potentially if he's not careful. Ironbark available. Jamili in position to just crowd control Chun-Li out of line of sight. Gorecki moves in to dispel. That now allows RubCub to charge across the battlefield and look for Hammer of Justice. RubCub has been getting Hammer of Justices pretty much on cooldown. I would say the boys need to look to stop RubCub from crossing the map so easily. Roasties tried to sap it, but he got Ring of Peace right before he landed the sap and knocked him into a double Psychic Scream. That was beautiful from Chun-Li and Smexon, stopping the crowd control chain and also then turning it on its head. Jamili in trouble. RubCub silenced, very low on health at this point. Cauterize is going to proc. Jamili's on the run. RubCub's trying to stop the drink. He's trying to heal and stop the drink at the same time. Gorecki's actually just going to immediately open on Jamili. Then get back to Smexon in the smoke bomb to stabilize. Roasties is grapple weapon, unable to attack. Smexon looks like he's trying to pre-mass dispel some defensive cooldown, maybe a Blessing of Protection along those lines. Gorecki is repositioned. RubCub knows if they land this, they need to land this next crowd control as soon as possible if they want to stay in the fight. Otherwise, there's a lot of defense available and they're falling behind on mana.
Yeah, RubCub's mana not doing great. Paralysis coming in from Chun-Li. What is M2KC going to do in this matchup? Mew Kitty Cat's backs against the wall. They don't really have much offense. Ring of Peace denies the polymorph. Jamili with a nice shimmer manages to find it anyways. Ring of Frost gets dropped down. Chun-Li caught in crowd control. Beautiful job by Jamili getting the polymorph on Chun-Li. Ring of Frost on Gorecki, setting up a 3v1 situation, but it gets turned on its head. Smexon with a nice double fear onto Roasty, onto RubCub. Now Chun-Li getting aggressive onto Jamili. He's in trouble. RubCub forces the Divine Shield and the ultimate sacrifice to keep Jamili alive. In M2KC, they're running out of defensives and they're running out of time.
Yep, this game is now heavily in favor of the boys at this point in time. How much longer can RubCub keep his team going for the push? Potentially, Smexon isn't going to be the target. I mean, there's so much more to work through. Maybe cut the string short, go after the Windwalker, try and do an all-in kill, or even go after Gorecki at this point.
RubCub.
They're actually going to be going after RubCub, trying to rush this game down to the finish. Grapple weapon on the Avenging Crusader. Not sure how much that actually affects the Avenging Crusader. It was an interesting attempt, but I don't think it really affects it at all. You can still use the Judgment, which is the most significant part of the healing from the Avenging Crusader. RubCub's going to survive that cheeky assault. Just shake it off. Gorecki activated Ironbark before the crowd control engage. This was a nice move on his part. That way they can hold on to Dispersion for a bigger push deeper into dampening. Smexon lands a double Psychic Scream. That's a good attempt to try and force cooldowns from Jamili. They get Blessing of Protection. Smexon's trying to dispel that off as soon as possible for Chun-Li, but Chun-Li is polymorph, not really able to output too much damage. Mana is evening out. Smexon just going to trade Dispersion. It's a fair trade for the Vendetta and the Combustion, but it wasn't any crowd control, so there is an opening for M2KC if they can crowd control Gorecki soon. Smexon can then just Void Shift. Jamili will then Ice Block. The defense is so close to call that it's really anyone's game still.
Jamili on the run, trying to get the crowd control he needs, but a nice life grip coming in from Smexen. That leap of faith, keeping Gorecki out of the Ring of Frost and allowing him to continue to heal. Smexen without the dispersion, a little bit vulnerable right now. We're at 11% dampening. Gorecki's mana is not doing well. M2KC, they could just win this match on mana if RubCub could stabilize, but in the meantime, Gorecki's actually sitting down for a drink. This is massive. If Gorecki can drink, if he recovered mana in the situation, the boys are still in it, but he wasn't able to, and this could be a similar case to what we saw in the last game. In the late game, the Assassination Rogue and the Fire Mage, they just end up winning due to raw pressure.
All right, Smexen in trouble. He fades, but that's not going to last as long as Gorecki is crowd controlled, so we may see Void Shift. If they have to use it, they Void Shift the blind, but it doesn't break. Was it 1 second too fast? That's unfortunate there. The blind is now, although going to be sat through for Gorecki. Maybe they switch to him. He's low on health and no mana, running Feral Affinity. That could be an opening. Roasties isn't going to overextend for it. Instead, playing for the safe strategy. Keep tunneling down the Shadow Priest until he is dead, which is going to be the safest route, although it's going to be a long and hard-fought road for M2KC now as they're out of mana. Very low on cooldowns as well. Jamili's isolated, but he's polymorphing Chun-Li, which is stalling it long enough for RubCub to get out of crowd control. Ultimate Sacrifice. RubCub activates Avenging Crusade. It's going to be 3 DPS effectively for M2KC. RubCub charges across to get crowd control as well for the team. RubCub putting the team on his shoulders right now, making a push to bank the last dispersion of the fight if they can get it. Smexen's doing everything he can to hold on to it, activating Fade, then looking to counter-engage with that Void Form, but activating Void Form while Avenging Crusader up is not going to be doing too much damage. RubCub is going to be able to heal through it quite easily. Gorecki dashing in quickly in Feral Affinity, adding whatever extra damage that he can. Smexen barely holding on. It's starting to look like a repeat where the caster just becomes overwhelmed from the pressure of the Fire Mage and the Assassination Rogue. The boys need to do something soon here, but they still need to get through an Ice Block. They still need to get through a Cloak of Shadows. At this point, there's basically 1 point of defense available for each team. Dispersion on Smexen, Ice Block for Jamili. Whoever forces it first is likely to win, and it looks like they're going to force Disperse first. Big kidney shot. There's no way you make it through this. He has to disperse, but potentially Jamili has to Ice Block at the same time. Gorecki races for it. And now there's basically no defense for either side. Jamili and Smexen
Ooh, nice
are the highest points of vulnerability. That Feral Affinity of Gorecki is carrying so hard right now. Gorecki is hard carrying the damage and manages to close out the game for the boys.
Wow, really well played there by the boys. It looked like M2KC was just trying to essentially dampen, just win the game off of mana. You know, Dragon's Breathing, Fists of Fury, all of these defensive plays coming in. But ultimately, the boys find their win condition. They actually win the race.
Yeah, and that's a nice thing as well. When you don't have the Warlock there, you get a bit of extra healing, and you get things like the grip on those Rings of Frost. And here Jamili gets a nice blink counterspell, and he starts setting up for that cross CC. He's going to go ahead and sheep Chun-Li in a moment right there, and then goes for the Ring of Frost. And there is the power of the Shadow Priest right there, gripping that Ring of Frost. He's going to prevent a situation that surely would result in Smexen dying, and instead, it's going to be able to allow them to counter pressure. There's the Kleptomania, but Chun-Li is now out of the cross crowd control. Gorecki realizes he doesn't have any mana, so this is an excellent time for him to go aggressive. There's no Hammer of Justice, and Smexen with a beautiful double fear into the Master Spell is going to allow Chun-Li to stick on his target. RubCub, no mana, no cooldowns available, and of course Gorecki with that Feral Affinity. We always compliment him finding those windows where he can get aggressive, and he does it beautifully.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of talent choices. Like, obviously, you guys can check the talents. Like, it's the end of the season, so if you want to be pushing those ratings, you should definitely be checking what talents using the Inspect tool that these players are playing, because they're the best talents almost always, and they will help you get to your titles. But one of the things that really caught me is that RubCub wasn't actually using the Shadow Resist aura in this matchup, which typically is the counter to Shadow Priest damage, right? It's like 15% off of all of the AoE damage and all of the damage over time, which is about 40 or so % of the Shadow Priest damage. It's pretty significant on a talent. And then as a result of that, Smexen was actually using Shadow Crash, which is a big burst talent that they can use. All of the apparition talents have been nerfed over time, so they had more burst damage to actually take down Jamili at the end there. So it's really interesting to see some of the adaptations.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a similar story for Jamili as we saw in Mageddon in the last series. He's not running the Temporal Shield,
yeah,
but
that too.
I feel like it's a big mistake. I mean, he's playing controlled burn. It's really not that much damage, to be honest with you. I don't think it's that great of a talent. You just play Temporal Shield, you play into your advantage, where in the late game, you just kind of win. The Assassination Rogue and the Fire Mage and the Paladin, they put out so much damage. You can get the Resto Druid out of mana and you just sit on the caster, like the Shadow Priest or the Destruction Warlock, and you end up winning the game. If you have Temporal Shield, you get to hold on to the Blessing of Sacrifice or the Hand of Sacrifice for a long period of time. You can save your Ice Block, your Cauterize. It just plays into their strategy. It plays into their win condition, and I don't really understand why they're not opting to play it.
Well, I feel like against the Shadow Priest team in particular, you don't get the same value as you would against like the Warlock team, because you can spam this spell nowadays as a Shadow Priest, of course, but in the same breath, the Shadow Priest is always slowed by the Assassination Rogue, so you can outrange it, drag the Windwalker away, and still get value. I'm assuming that that's the logic why they don't pick it. However, I do agree. I think Controlled Burn is more or less useless. I think there's a lot of better. Well, to be honest, I would rather pick Flame Cannon over Control Burn. I would rather pick Temporal Shield as well over Control Burn. And he was also running Hot Streak, and this is something I've seen from all of these mages running the Firestarter build. So Firestarter is an honor talent that allows you to reduce the cooldown of your combustion every 5 seconds when you press Fireball. Now, there's two Firestarter talents. There's one that's just a regular talent as well, not the honor talent, which allows you to guaranteed crit all your Pyroblasts and all your Fireballs at the target over 90% HP. Those two, because you're just using Fireball so much, are, I think, really good to use in conjunction. We saw Majorine was using the Scorch talent, where your Scorch always crits on a low HP target, and Jamili was playing Pyromaniac, which gives your spells, like, I think 8% chance to sometimes, when you Pyroblast, get another Pyroblast proc. And I feel like both of them are way lower value compared to just playing Firestarter.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to get something going here, because obviously the boys win that one. Maybe it is just a case of talents, you know, like if they're playing for this dampening condition, it makes sense to have Temporal Shield protected by some of the Paladin's trash debuffs. It makes sense to have the Shadow Aura, surely, because both of those are going to increase healing and mitigate damage from the boys.
Yeah, it's like those moments you kind of talked about where Jamili was using his Dragon's Breath on the Fist of Fury. So what happens, basically the mini game between Windwalker Monk and a mage is, the Windwalker Monk wants to get the mage in a position where he has no shimmers, he can't get away, and that's when you use your Storm, Earth, and Fire and you Fist of Fury. That's the scary moment, and that's why Jamili is using his Dragon's Breath to deny that damage, because it's a lot of burst. But if you Temporal Shield, even just 2 seconds of it, even if the Shadow Priest dispels it, you still get that 2-second value. It's going to be, you know, 30% heal, and that can be the difference between using Ice Block and not using Ice Block. So
I agree.
I just think it's a good choice, and it plays into the strategy. Yeah, that's what I want to see from M2KC. I just think they could just play their talents a little bit more intelligently, play the same, and they would end up winning the game.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how it plays out. It's also interesting to note that Storm didn't choose this Shadow Priest Windwalker matchup, because they had Flormat on their team, who is literally the highest rated Shadow Priest in US right now, playing Shadow Priest Windwalker. But the boys have found this matchup. It seems to be a favorable one, or at least a better one than the Warlock that we saw coming out of Storm earlier. M2KC, though, their strategy was close to winning the race. Maybe with a few adaptations, they'll be able to take game 2.
I think Gorecki was the only reason that the boys ended up winning. If Gorecki didn't do extra damage, I don't think Jamili would have had to block. If Gorecki didn't do extra damage, I don't think Jamili would have died. So I would say that Gorecki was to all of the credit for the boys being able to find victory there. I think if M2KC just held out a little bit longer and Gorecki didn't add in that extra damage, that Smexen would have actually gone down. I think the compositions are evenly matched. Of course, Jamili should be min-maxing his talents a little bit more, especially at the highest level. But in terms of their execution of strategy, I think it was solid overall. Perhaps at some point they should switch to Chun-Li. RubCub, I'm wondering if he is running the Shadow Resistance Aura again here. It seems like they've built RubCub's talents to be more counteractive of the Windwalker, so running the double Blessing of Protection, but they're not actually attacking the Windwalker, so I don't see very much value other than being able to remove 2 Touch of Deaths in the game. I think just reducing the Shadow Priest damage overall would also be more efficient for RubCub and his team. You see M2KC going for a Smoke Bomb play on Smexen. They're trying to get Gorecki to run into the Smoke Bomb so he can be stunned, but regardless, they end up overlapping. Dispersion and Ironbark and Fate. This is a big overlap. If Gorecki has to trinket this, it's basically all of their cooldowns. Yep. He has to trinket it. That's a very good start for M2KC.
Yeah, Smexen, I think he used the Fireblood Racial as well, so they used 5 defensive cooldowns in that one exchange. Void Shift is available. Smexen has the Trinket coming up in around 15 seconds, but after that, the boys, they don't really have too much left to work with. There's good offensive pressure now onto Jamili. He's trying to kite away, get out along the side of Smexen, getting some counter pressure rolling, but there's good pressure from Chun-Li and Smexen. Jamili could fall, or at least have to use some of his defensives. Blessing of Freedom allows him to kite away and get some distance. The RUBCub looking to set up his team with the Hammer of Justice. Jamili gets in position. Ring of Peace denies, and I have to compliment Chun-Li in this matchup. He's been doing a really good job with his Ring of Peace. It's difficult to land the Spear Hand Strike on a Polymorph coming in from a Mage, especially because he can pair that Polymorph with Shimmer to gain distance. The only ranged interrupt a Windwalker Monk really has is that Ring of Peace, and he's been doing a really good job to use that as just an extra interrupt onto Jamili to deny these setups coming in from M2KC, and I think it's really well played.
Touch of Death push from Chun-Li, shut down by Jamili. Gorecki gets swapped to for just a moment. It looks like they're going to try and commit. They managed to pull Barkskin. Perhaps if they can stay on target, they can punish that Feral Affinity. Beautiful Ursul's Vortex, pulling RUBCub back away from Gorecki. Roasty snared up, goes for the sprint, gets disable rooted by Chun-Li. Has to be Blessing of Freedom, so now RUBCub won't have that if he needs to use it on himself to get to Gorecki for a Hammer of Justice. So good min-maxing of snares on Roasties to prevent the reconnect. They pull a lot more mobility cooldowns from the team of M2KC than they otherwise would have. Gorecki's in stealth now, realizing that he's going to be the target likely with no Gladiator's Medallion and no Barkskin. So the best way for him to not be the target is to be invisible. You can't attack something that you can't see. So Gorecki goes in stealth and he's just going to be waiting. If they commit their attack to a different target, that target has cooldowns to survive. So that is a smart maneuver on Gorecki's part. He avoids that situation that could have been awkward or potentially his life simply by just doing nothing. Sometimes doing nothing is the best move.
I mean, that certainly is the case. Blind on a Gorecki, he trickets out. Jamili getting bursted down, forced into the ice block. Master Spell coming in, but Roasty able to interrupt it. Nicely done by Roasty, backing up Jamili in that moment. That was a little bit scary for M2KC. If we look at mana, we'll have to see where Gorecki's at this point. RUBCub's around 55%. Gorecki, is he behind? No, he's way ahead at this point, which is surprising to me. I'm not sure if he was able to escape for a drink. I didn't notice it, but that's big for the boys.
All right, Gorecki caught in a Dragon's Breath. They're trying to attack him. He actually manages to re-stealth stun Roasties and try and escape from RUBCub. A kidney shot into a Hammer of Justice is going to be scary, or vice versa, a Hammer of Justice into a kidney shot. So Gorecki's going to respect this attack and use Barkskin, but it wasn't Vendetta, wasn't Avenging Crusader, and now he doesn't have Barkskin, and now he doesn't have Gladiator's Medallion. M2KC seem a lot more focused on punishing this Feral Affinity of Gorecki, realizing that his ability to use it is too much of a threat, so by attacking him, they force him to run away. If he tries to go for an attack, then he risks his own life, so it's an interesting choice of strategy from M2KC. They're basically saying Gorecki is the biggest threat on the team. They want to remove that by attacking him, but so far now Gorecki is just bouncing laps around the map, and Smexen and Chun-Li will be able to ramp up a lot of damage. Gorecki gets into bear form with an Efflorescence Mushroom on the ground, so this is basically the most amount of healing he can do to himself, but it's Vendetta, Avenging Crusader, and multiple Gladiators Maledicts. I'm not sure if that will be enough on its own. Bashing up Roasties, double Psychic Scream from Smexen. Gorecki jumps across the map and survives an attack that otherwise would have taken him down. So I will say that Gorecki's awareness to know when to be aggressive and defensive and when he's the target has been 100% accuracy at this point.
Yeah, definitely good judgment calls. Life Sweep on Jamili, Paralysis on RUBCub, another setup coming in from the boys. They're looking to counter pressure. Dragon's Breath on Chun-Li. Jamili slows them down, and now nice control on Gorecki, on Chun-Li. Now it's Smexen who's on the back foot, forced into the dispersion, but that was the combustion. That was a very nice attempt there by M2KC. They get the cooldowns that they need, and now Smexen's actually a bit of a vulnerable target. Going after Gorecki didn't seem to be the best for M2KC. They really weren't able to get too much done. Gorecki was just prepared for all of their attacks, so I think switching it up, going back after Smexen is a smart move.
Yeah, they definitely need to be a little bit more fluid in their targeting, just switching more often. That way they can get more mana from Gorecki. If they become predictable, then Gorecki spends less mana, and it's both basically impossible to get a kill if you're so predictable against a healer of Gorecki's caliber. They do get his Gladiator's Medallion on blind, but Smoke Bomb not available, no Vendetta for some time, so no opportunity right now for M2KC. They should probably just keep attacking the Shadow Priest as they are and try to run Gorecki out of mana and try and overwhelm the Shadow Priest in dampening, but they still need to be aware of when Gorecki is getting a little bit flavorful with that Feral Affinity. Garecki's jumping in for the bash and a Gladiator's Maledict on Jamili, but RubCub anticipated the crowd control and activated Blessing of Sacrifice prior to the engagement, redirecting the damage of that attack to himself rather than Jamili, who would have been vulnerable in that position. So good read by RubCub, denying a kill. Chun-Li's trying to punish that cooldown usage by switching to the Paladin, which is a great strategy, as the redirected damage from the sacrifice adds to the damage that you do to the Paladin, putting RubCub even further behind. They stun lock RubCub on his Avenging Crusader, then they Psychic Scream him, removing that cooldown for a few seconds, but ultimately RubCub looks like he will be able to connect. They stun Garecki, but it has to be a Ring of Frost. He's in cat form, and because it's a Ring of Frost, Jamili fake casts it out to try and get it on the life grip, but he is silenced afterwards and unable to find it. Now Garecki gets some uptime potentially for that Feral Affinity, stunning Jamili on the Polymorph so that he can heal Smexen through the Gladiator's Maledict, but Iron Bark may not be enough, and Garecki gets caught by the Polymorph as a result. I think in that exchange it may have been necessary to disperse rather than Iron Bark. Garecki couldn't handle the amount of damage at this point in dampening. Garecki is still crowd controlled. Smexen could fall. Big damage. He void shifts over to Garecki, but now Garecki could get swapped too. They see the opportunity. Jamili's lobbing up Pyros. They see Roasties. He's going to get bopped aggressively and just close it out. Beautiful swap from M2KC. Nice adaptation towards the end of the game.
Yeah, really nicely done. They exploit the Feral Affinity there from Garecki, and honestly, attacking the Druid here seemed even pretty decent defensively because of the amount of crowd control Jamili was able to get out on the DPS.
Well, I liked what they were doing with Chun-Li and Garecki. They were just stopping the Polymorph. Honestly, Garecki played it so well towards the end there. He went into stealth, avoided the Hammer of Justice, stunned up Jamili, got a couple of glow bolts off, and then here he gets Dragon's Breath. Chun-Li immediately Spear Hand Strike and then uses his Ring of Peace, and then here, Chun-Li gets an Incapacitate on that Polymorph, and Smexen does a great job there as well, gripping the Ring of Frost. So here, everything looks good. Garecki's gonna Shadow Melt and stun Jamili, get a couple of heals out, and here is the big mistake. Honestly, Garecki shouldn't have tanked that Polymorph right there, and because he was spending so much time avoiding the Polymorph, and then Jamili ended up getting the Polymorph anyway there at the end, that just made all the momentum shift to M2KC. And then of course here Smexen should have void swapped Chun-Li, who still had his touch of karma. Instead he void shifted Garecki, who was in a stun, basically sentenced him to death. So little bit of a mistake at the end there, but they honestly, Garecki played so well to avoid that CC chain. I think all of the boys played well to avoid it, but then they just kind of tripped on the finish line there.
Yeah, it was such a back and forth game. We saw some attacks over on Garecki, some attacks over on Smexen. Ultimately, it's a very close series, guys, here between M2KC and the boys. We'll see who comes out on top after this. Ladies and gentlemen, you join us at a tied series here between the boys and M2KC, both of them running their main compositions for this matchup. No variation, just maps and awesome gameplay from both sides. We'll have to see if M2KC can repeat the feat they did on game 2 with the kill over onto Garecki, or if the boys are going to kind of shore up those last little mistakes and take game 3.
I mean, it's as simple as not using Void Shift on your healer. That's a glass cannon with no defense while they're stunned. That was a big mistake, and possibly showing some inexperience on the Shadow Priest during those very clutch moments towards the end of the game where you can't afford to make a mistake like that. Mew Kitty Cats get a win off of that, but now on Tolvaron Arena, a great map for Druids to be able to sneak around, drink, reset, and extend the game for a long period of time. It's likely that we see the boys be able to come back in the series, although I'm not 100% sold that this Shadow Priest Windwalker Druid is their best answer overall. Jamili greeting Smexen while he's sapped with a quick little wave. Sapping then Chun-Li and opening on Smexen. Garecki is going to get combat. RubCub is still mounted, so he's able to close the gap quickly. Garecki anticipates the crowd control again and activates Iron Bark before the attack. This is stabilizing Smexen throughout Jamili's combustion. Now long enough for its attack to have faded. So good read by Garecki on that incoming stun, denying a lot of damage as a result.
Yeah, and it looks like the initial assault is going to be completely thwarted by Chun-Li. Nicely done with the paralysis onto Jamili, denying the follow-up polymorph out of that Hammer of Justice. And that's kind of the mini-game for Chun-Li in this particular matchup, is he has to shut down Jamili. When RubCub pushes in, he lands the Hammer of Justice. It's up to Chun-Li with his paralysis, with his Ring of Peace, to deny polymorph, to deny Ring of Frost. And if he can do that, that's going to free Garecki up and allow him enough time to actually land the heals he needs to keep Smexen alive. Jamili actually sneaks in a poly. Nicely done by Jamili. A little bit of a mistake there by Garecki. Polymorph into Hammer of Justice. Nice Master Spell coming in from Smexen. Really good job And that's important for Roasty and Jamili to interrupt. They have to coordinate their interrupt, the counterspell, as well as the kick to deny that mass dispel, because otherwise Smexon's going to have free reign on freeing up Gorecki from crowd control, and then there's just no chance they can actually take him down.
All right, RubCub stunned, Roasty stunned. That's good usage of crowd control from the boys as they push for some cooldowns, but don't actually get anything as a result of that crowd control. RubCub's going to cross midfield, look to lock down Gorecki, but I believe Gorecki snuck away out of range, so RubCub's going to have to spend a little bit of extra time out in the open waiting for Gorecki. RubCub wants to get that stun, but now he's silenced. Gorecki's going to use that time to cross the map and avoid the Paladin. This map is great for the Druid. Now jumping into the fight, forcing a Blessing of Sacrifice. Gorecki navigating Tolvaron quite effectively. RubCub struggling to get to the target, uses Blessing of Freedom, but they get Psychic Screamed on it by Smexon, so he's going to lose that Freedom effect shortly. Chun-Li can start snaring him. Gorecki's trying to re-stealth around the pillar, stun RubCub right when he runs in to stun him. Gorecki has wasted the better part of, I want to say, maybe 30 seconds of RubCub's time by just avoiding him this long. Although he is falling behind on mana, having to expend so much healing from not healing for so long, running away from RubCub. The boys should look to try and punish RubCub at some point for how long he's overextended. I mean, he's just chasing Gorecki. But Gorecki, he almost looks like he's having fun running away from RubCub. Re-stealthing, jumping in, stunning Jamili, running around the corner, re-stealthing, jumping in, stunning, and just rinse repeating this over and over. RubCub has burned a lot of cooldowns as a result of this style of play. Roasties is falling behind, has to trade evasion. Chun-Li switches targets. Now Jamili could be in trouble. Jamili's trying to catch Gorecki with some blink polymorphs, but he's not getting caught. Now repositioned, RubCub moves in, finally getting the Hammer of Justice, but he pre-Iron Barks it and they mass dispel it, so that should be more than enough for Smexon to start getting aggressive. Gorecki jumps in again with the Feral Affinity, stunning Jamili, timing it with that Shadow Crash. A beautiful combination of talents there with the Rake stun from Feral Affinity and the Shadow Crash burst, putting Jamili behind.
Yeah, Jamili under fire. That was a nice Ursula's Vortex coming in from Gorecki, allowing Chun-Li some additional uptime. Jamili tried to use Shimmer to get out of it, but got sucked back in by that Ursula's Vortex, and Chun-Li got some uptime because of it. Roasty's going to be moving in. What are they going for? Blind play onto Gorecki. He trinkets out as Combustion gets pulled out onto Smexon. That's an easy trade for Gorecki. His healing is powerful right now. He didn't even have to trade out the Iron Bark. Now finally a Hammer of Justice coming in from RubCub. What are they going to be able to get out of it? Roasties actually goes for the Vanish Sap. Jamili's been denied so much on the crowd control. Roasty's going to trade out that Vanish to secure some CC, and they do manage. They didn't really force out anything, actually. I thought they got the Dispersion, but they didn't. It was just the Vampiric Embrace that was enough. And M2KC, they committed a lot. That was Vanish. There was the Combustion, and the Blind, and all they got was Gorecki's Trinket.
Yep, big push there, not paying out for M2KC. We're still tied up between the boys and M2KC. Obviously, the boys want some vengeance after being defeated last week by M2KC. Now with this new composition, the Shadow Priest and the Windwalker, they're showing signs of life. Although a bit of a blunder in the last game. Had that mistake not been made, perhaps the boys would be up 2-0 in the series. They try to catch Gorecki on a swap with the Shadow Step, but Gorecki saw it coming and jumped into bear form, so he's reduced a lot of damage on himself. Jamili, though, with the double Ring of Frost, Smexon actually running into that. Maybe a bit of a mistake. It put him on diminishing return at least, but it happened to be at the same time Chun-Li was crowd controlled, so Gorecki is alone for quite a long period of time. They're just chasing him down. Roasties gets bashed away. Gorecki ducks around the corner. Smexon snipes the Shadow Crash, jumps into Void form, dishing out a ton of damage onto Jamili, whilst stunning RubCub at the same moment, now fearing him. Beautiful engagement by Smexon. They left him open for a few seconds. Now he's really getting to shine with tons of pressure on Jamili. RubCub dispels that Gladiator's Maledict instantly. Is there another one to follow up? I think if Chun-Li wanted to, he's in a poly unable to. RubCub pops the Avenging Crusader. RubCub and the team of M2KC want to get aggressive. Who are they going to attack? Is it Gorecki? I mean, it likely is. He's got no Gladiator's Medallion, no Bark Skin, but instead they go for Dragon's Breath, Ring of Frost. Smexon grips Gorecki away. He shape-shifts the Life Grip. Pre-mass Dispelcast by Smexon, snipes it instantly. Beautiful play from Smexon.
They need to be more coordinated, honestly. M2KC is letting way too many mass dispels come in on that Hammer of Justice. It's the one thing that's sort of required against the Shadow Priest is you have to have either a kidney shot or a counterspell or a kick to deal with that. And if you don't, then the Hammer of Justice is essentially a waste if Smexon knows what he's doing, which it appears he does. So that's something that M2KC could definitely clean up a little bit. Or 6% dampening right now. Roasty's going for a play. Goes for the blind onto Gorecki. M2KC's looking to make an offensive push over onto Smexon. Combustion gets traded out. Chun-Li denies with the beautiful leg sweep. Jamili now getting some damage rolling, looking for a polymorph. Does manage to sneak it in. Nicely done by Jamili. And as a result, I believe Smexon's going to be forced into his dispersion. If they have any more follow-up crowd control, Gurecki doesn't have much catch-up mechanics at this point. There's no Iron Bark, but a huge heal tops him off. I guess I was wrong about that.
Jamili in a bit of trouble now as the boys look to counter-attack if they've got crowd control for Rubka, but they used it on Jamili to stop crowd control. They're switching to Gurecki again. M2KC mixing it up, trying to keep the boys on their toes. Ring of Peace from Chun-Li. Roasties shadow steps in to reconnect. Gurecki jumps likely to safety. Blessing of Freedom on Roasties. They really wanted to go for it, but they're not able to keep up. The Feral Affinity's movement speed bonus. Too much, too fast for them. Jamili still at half, Roasties as well. Rubcub's out of mana. Gurecki has way more. I mean, this is a big lead for the boys in terms of cooldowns. Unless
drinking.
They make a mistake, they need to move in and stop the drink. Gurecki's going to crowd control Rubcub while he was trying to regenerate mana. Roasties is very low on health in a stun. Rubcub gets stunned again by Gurecki. Feral Affinity paying dividends right now. That gets the Divine Shield, Blessing of Sacrifice, big cooldowns. Rubcub could be a target now later on. Roasties as well is vulnerable. M2KC are falling apart. They're trying to get something going here on Smexon with the smoke bomb. Smexon gets out of it with his Gliders Medallion. Gurecki then uses Iron Bark to reduce damage. Chun-Li disarms Roasties to stop the attack. This usage of defense should be enough for Smexon to stabilize. They life grip the Polymorph, unfortunately not into a meteor of any area of effect damage, so Gurecki will be crowd controlled. Jamili blinks out of range of interrupt of Chun-Li, gets another Polymorph, goes for the third but gets denied. Does Rubcub have a stun? Doesn't look like it. Smexon's getting bursted. He's just dying to damage. This time though, didn't make the mistake of void shifting to the Druid. He void shifts to Chun-Li, so Chun-Li will be chilling. He's got Touch of Karma. Now Gurecki can play aggressive. He jumps in for the bash. Smexon gets polymorphed. M2KC realize they're just going to wait for these cooldowns, get control of the fight, polymorph Smexon a few more times, allow Roasties to reconnect. Rubcub's charging across, has Hammer of Justice. Curious as to why Jamili went for the Ring of Frost in that position, but ultimately, unless Gurecki shapeshifts the stun, it's not going to be consequential. Jamili goes for polymorph, gets paralysis. Chun-Li needs to stop these polymorphs at all costs. Roasties can't sap because he's grapple weapon. Chun-Li totally shuts down that crowd control attempt. Gurecki jumps in to try and engage crowd control for his team, looking like he wants to re-stealth. If he re-stealths, jumps in on Roasties, stuns him, I mean, it could be lights out for Roasties. There's no defense if Gurecki can manage to find that time, but he may not want to. I mean, Smexon doesn't have dispersion. He is likely to be afraid of dying at this point. Mana is even. Gurecki sneaks away. I think he's drinking. If he's drinking, they need to stop it. Rubcub charges across. I'm wondering if they've given up on it. Gurecki decides not to drink. He's going to be pouncing in over onto Jamili at very low health. Chun-Li connects a huge Rising Sun kick. Rubcub goes for a stun, but Jamili is so low on health. Avenging Crusader is 13 seconds away. Rubcub needs 11 more seconds. Jamili very low on health. Ice Block available, still has Cauterize. They should be able to make it, but Roasties maybe not with that much defense. Rake stunned, Rubcub's paralysis, Avenging Crusader in one, but Ice Block gets forced, so now it would be an overlap. Roasties is still low, Avenging Crusader, it needs to be enough. Judgment on Smexon, Rubcub gets knocked on the Holy Light, goes for it again. It's still not even stabilizing at 27% dampening. As soon as that Avenging Crusader fades, Roasties is going to be in a lot of trouble, but in the meantime, while it's active, Smexon will be. He has to disperse, and this fight is constantly back and forth.
Yeah, very nice leap of faith there by Smexon, freeing Gurecki up from the Ring of Frost, but Jamili fake casted it. The one thing Jamili has been doing really well in this matchup is fake casting that Ring of Frost. Now there's an opportunity for him to actually try to land it here, but unfortunately gets denied. Smexon really nicely done with the silence. Big interrupt on Jamili. Jamili in a lot of trouble. Cauterize gets procced. He's on the run. Ultimate Sacrifice comes in from Rubcub as well, but it's Smexon that could fall. Dragon's Breath onto Gurecki. He manages to get the Iron Bark. Does he have the healing to keep Smexon alive? Chun-Li trying to do what he can to slow down Jamili and keep up the pressure. Smexon stabilizes Rubcub. He's got no tools left. He can't do anything to keep Jamili alive. They have to play a little bit of defense. Jamili getting lower. There's no Cauterize. Gurecki looking for a re-stealth. If he can find it, he might be able to get that Rake stun onto Jamili and take him down. Blind, defensively, going to be traded out by Roasties. Could commit the Vanish Sap as well, but doesn't look like he's going to be going for it. Vanish Chief Shot onto Chun-Li. Garrote Silence on Smexon. Good feels coming in from Roasties. Now he doesn't have Vanish as a defensive cooldown, but he still has the evasion. Cloak of Shadows coming in around 40. And I think it's still going to be intelligent for the boys to just go after Jamili as much as possible, try to take him down. But M2KC, they're looking to make an offensive push onto Smexon.
This could easily be a cross kill at this point in the game with dampening so high. 3 members of M2KC low, but Smexon barely holding on. They're trying to Shadow Crash, big combo. Jamili's going to fall first, but Smexon could follow suit. His dispersion just became available. Chun-Li's off healing with Vivifies. Chun-Li's backup throughout this game was stellar. The boys now move to match point.
This really doesn't seem like an easy matchup for the boys. When we talked to Chun-Li, he was like, oh, I'm so confident, I'm really feeling it today. I feel like they're getting by on their skill mostly in this situation. Every single time Chun-Li has an answer, we highlighted in Game 2 when M2KC did get the kill, how good their CC denial was, and it was just that one slip-up, but there was no slip-up in Game 3.
Nope, there was not. Well, there was actually a couple of moments where Gorecki tanked a few polymorphs, but Smexin really played well this game. He got so many master spells off. He really came in clutch for his team, and this is the flex player on the roster of the boys. You know, he's a main warrior. Last season, he was putting his team on his back on the DK. This time around, he is on that Shadow Priest, and he's looking great so far in this series. And you know, Jamili doesn't have any cooldowns defensive available here, and you know, every single time they go in for these Ring of Frost attempts out of the Hammer of Justice, there's always Chun-Li there, making sure that Jamili can't really land them that easily. Here, another beautiful disarm on RubCub, and then of course another big shutdown by Gorecki with that Rake stun on Smexin, and then of course we see the Maledict as well at the end to close out the game there by Gorecki, snipes it out, and if you time it the way Gorecki just timed it, you can actually absorb the entire healing there of the Cauterize. So he makes sure that the killing blow is actually the Maledict trinket, absorbs that Cauterize effect, and just kills Jamili right on the spot, denying that last defense.
Yeah, really well played by Gorecki and the boys, quite frankly. I mean, yeah, maybe a couple of things, but overall solid gameplay sees them through to match point here, 2-1 advantage. Smexin, I find it interesting, he's playing a full versatility build. You know, normally Priest will prioritize crit or maybe haste. Here, he's just full defense. Meanwhile, we talked about it at the start of Game 1, and it does seem to be a theme that RubCub and Jamili are not opting for super defensive talents.
And I don't fully understand why, because I do feel like in the late game they do have an advantage with Kleptomania, the Assassination Rogue. We talk about it time and time again. It's a theme in these tournaments. The Assassination Rogue does a ton of damage, plus dampening. It is basically impossible for classes like Destruction Warlock and Shadow Priest to survive for long periods of time. So I think if there was a little bit more defensive adaptation coming in from M2KC, they could just win in the late game. I mean, they could continue to play how they are, try to win early on, but in the late game, they have that added defense. They don't have to trade out big cooldowns like the Blessing of Sacrifice, like the Ice Block as consistently, and I think just a little bit more defensive talent choices could swing this matchup in their favor.
Okay, so obviously we're in a situation now where M2KC faces being dropped down to the lower bracket, which is a surprise because they did have a very good tournament in the first cup. The boys have found something, they've adapted, and it's working very well for them. Is it time for M2KC to get off the composition, do you think, Sid? Do you think this RM Paladin is capable more often than not of winning the matchup? Because they would need to win 2 in a row, or would you rather maybe see Jamili on Elemental or Rosita Jones coming into play?
I mean, the Rogue Mage Druid looked good with Rosita Jones if they want to play Rogue Mage Druid. It's still a similar strategy, and they can still win with late game or early game potential. I think they can still win with the Rogue Mage Paladin. I feel like if they properly cross crowd control a bit better, they can definitely win. Hook Point's a good map to stop Gorecki from drinking, so they can win off pressure. Switching the talents is still a big thing. It seems like the most obvious one after seeing Never Lucky's success with their composition focused on more defense and just surviving longer. If M2KC switch their talents so they can survive longer, why wouldn't they also be able to reap the benefits that Never Lucky is already taking? So maybe it's a little bit of, what do you want to say? I'm trying to be politically correct here. Is it bullheadedness?
That's not like you.
Bullheadedness from the team of M2KC with the double Blessing of Protection. That's more of a all-in kind of the way that they're playing it. I mean, they use Blessing of Protection so Rosie's gets uptime out of stuns. They're not using it really to stop Touch of Death or Touch of Karma, which is what I would have expected them to use that talent for. Instead, they could just go for the Shadow Resistance and just have 15% reduced Smexin for the entire game. I mean, that sounds a bit better to me. Just reduce Smexin overall by 15% for the entire game. But we'll have to wait and see. They have the opportunity here to make a change if they want to. We did see Windwalker Death Knight from them as well last week, although I don't think it was really the best showing, but that could also be an option. They're really running the clock down to the wire.
Yeah, one of the cool things about this as well, as we do see the same composition locked in, is that if Jamili does lose, he'll drop down into the move, which is always a fantastic showing. It's former teammates Jamili against Peekaboo, the showdown for top 4. So that will be something to stick forward to if we do get that outcome. But of course, M2KC aren't out just yet. They can still turn this around. One question I want to ask is, obviously Shadow Priest, they don't have any range interrupts really. I mean, they have the Silence, the Horror, but typically they're putting those onto RubCub. Would this be a matchup where you would consider potentially running Greater Pyroblasty?
I feel like on a small map, maybe not, but on Polveron, you could probably get away with running Greater Pyroblast. I mean, it's a pretty effective tool against Shadow Priest teams in general, but you also, you rely less on crowd control in that sense. It's more about just getting out the Greater Pyroblast and making it to the later stage of the game where it just kind of becomes unhealable damage. It's definitely an option, but I think Shanli is doing such a great job as well, shutting Jamili down throughout the entirety of the game, so maybe that's why he doesn't want to opt for it. You could definitely experiment with it a little bit though.
All right, well, we are heading into the 4th game of the series, potentially the final game, if the boys can secure through with another game or another victory here. Chun-Li, Smex, and Greki, they bring out this new composition. It's the first time we've seen it from them, and it's looking strong here in the upper bracket.
Hook Point, a pretty aggressive map, so maybe we won't see any talent changes from M2KC. I still see the double Blessing of Protection, so unlikely that we see the Shadow Resistance aura. I do not see Temporal Shield, so M2KC are still running those talents. Although on Hook Point, since it is close-quartered combat, they could potentially win just off of aggression. Although moving forward onto a bigger map, I would like to see those talents change. Smexon tries to Mass Dispel. Greki's crowd control gets stopped on it. Now he's very low on health as a result. Interrupted on Shadow. Potentially going to Game 5 early on. Greki pre-Ironbark's blind, so he would like to be able to sit through this, as it has not been any aggressive cooldowns activated yet. Psychic Scream stops the sap. Beautifully done by Smexon.
Yep, Smexon manages to survive. There's a nice preemptive Ironbark, and Greki actually made a talent choice. He switched up one of his talents. He's actually playing Renewal in this game, so perhaps expecting that they go after him. That's going to be a key defensive cooldown that he could survive with. Smexon using the Vampiric Embrace with the Fireblood in order to survive. It's been a good offensive push early on from M2KC. They're trying to keep the boys on the back foot. It's going to be really difficult on this map for Greki to ever escape and go for drinks, which we saw him able to recover a little bit of mana in earlier games on those larger maps. So I think this map choice could be pretty good here for M2KC, and they could keep up this very aggressive playstyle, which they're kind of known for. And they could take Greki down, or they could take the boys down by getting Greki out of mana as a possible win condition.
That's certainly a viable strategy for M2KC here, as we're on match point in the upper bracket, so the loser will not be eliminated from the competition entirely, but this new composition that the boys are breaking out against M2KC appears to be effective and could allow them to ride through to the top 4 for Sunday if they can just win this one game, or win the one after it if they don't find victory. Mana is surprisingly even. I was actually expecting M2KC to have a bit of a lead on Hook Point, but there is no lead there, which is not spelling good news for them. Rubcup activating Avenging Crusader. Greki moves in to crowd control it, but they're going to need more than just a bash, so Smexon gets close and personal, securing a Psychic Scream, but there is no more crowd control. Rubcup is going to have hammer time now. He's going to be dealing damage, and that damage will heal the team, although he's trying to get Roasties back to target using that Blessing of Freedom on the Entangling Roots. Now moving over to stun Greki. Rubcup engaging the assault for his team towards Smexon, looking to force a dispersion. Can they find it? Ring of Peace is denying the connect. They can't interrupt the Mass Dispel as a result. Good teamwork between Chun-Li and Smexon to move Roasties away from Smexon, so he couldn't stop Mass Dispel. Now Greki is able to freely Trinket Blind and save the team. Overall, the coordination of the boys is solid, and as a result, we see why they're able to find victory against the Rogue Mage Paladin.
Yeah, there's great pressure on Roasty and Jamili. Cyclone now secured over on Rubcup. Good aggressive plays coming in from the boys once again. Jamili trying to find a Ring of Frost, unable to find it, but I think it was mostly just a bait for an interrupt. Going for the polymorph on Chun-Li. Nice setup here by Jamili. That's exactly what he needs to do. Get the polymorph on Chun-Li as the Hammer of Justice hits, and that way there's no one that can really mess around and stop him from getting that Ring of Frost, and those are the consistent setups we need to see. I like the coordination there by M2KC. That was a good offensive push. We just need to see that basically rinsed and repeat throughout this game.
All right, let's see if they can rinse, repeat. Greki looks like he's trying to drink. Did M2KC see it? Doesn't look like it. They're actually being killed while Greki regenerates to full mana. That's not a good situation to be in. Greki keeping his team in the fight, realizing that mana is certainly going to be a deficit that he won't overcome later in the fight due to the map, so taking any opportunity to regenerate mana is going to be a game-winning play. Rubcup silenced, Roasties stunned, but Roasties anticipated this attack and activated Feint before being stunned, so protected himself from Rubcup having to use more significant cooldowns to survive that attack. Nice read by Roasties. RubCub's moving in. He wants to get a stun. Gorecki sees him. He's trying to dodge him, but these pillars are much smaller than Tolvaron, so RubCub can sneak up, stun Gorecki. Jamili blinks in to get a crowd control, but Gorecki's in cat form. It had to be a Ring of Frost, and it doesn't look like he's going to get it. Gorecki then repositions away from RubCub. Gorecki's main priority is stay as far away from RubCub as possible for as long as possible so that the Hammer of Justices are so difficult to get, because the Paladin doesn't do a lot of healing while he's moving. And then whenever RubCub comes close, stun RubCub and try and crowd control him back. Roasties with a nice Shadow Step kick intercepted that crowd control chain, and now RubCub is open to be in position for a stun, but Gorecki sneaks into stealth while RubCub was silenced. RubCub is actually pathing where Gorecki was in stealth, anticipating his movements, now securing a stun for Jamili. He has to Ring of Frost him through the pillar, beautifully placed by Jamili. Now Chun-Li and a Poly, they need to stop Mass Dispel. Roasties stops it, but they drop the Poly on Chun-Li, so Chun-Li can grapple weapon Roasties. Regardless, huge damage on Smexen. He is going to trade Dispersion and survive, but now will not have Dispersion for Vendetta.
Scary moments here. Roasties, Jamili, RubCub, they got to get aggressive over on the Smexen. He's already traded out the Dispersion. There's no Trinket, but he does have the Void Shift. If they can keep him in a stun lock, he won't be able to get it off. Full stun, Smoke Bomb gets dropped out. Gorecki charging in. Hammer of Justice comes in from RubCub. Another nice attempt here from M2KC. They have to get something rolling. It appears that the boys, if they can stall out the game long enough, they end up just winning it with sheer pressure coming in from Chun-Li and Smexen, especially when Gorecki finds these windows of opportunity to get into cat form with the Feral Affinity and throw out that extra bit of damage. Mana still in favor of the boys in this particular matchup. Jamili tried to push in, going for Dragon's Breath, but Gorecki, heads up play, was able to avoid it. Now Jamili really being punished for playing that aggressive. RubCub struggling to keep him alive, finds a Holy Light. Gorecki denies some healing with the Cyclone. Can Gorecki get a Cyclone on RubCub? Is he even going to try to go for it? Doesn't look like it. Smexen lands a nice Double Fear. Now Jamili, he's left all alone. Ring of Peace denies any casts. Nice crowd control coming in from the boys. This is a beautiful attempt. Like Yvonne Jamili, this could be the ice block or the ultimate sacrifice from RubCub, which is what they ultimately choose to go for. Now looking to reverse the pressure. An attempt here from M2KC. They find the crowd control on Gorecki. Smexen getting bursted down. Big damage coming in from Roasties. Void Shift's going to be traded out onto Chun-Li once again, and this is a scary moment for Chun-Li. What is he going to do? Blessing of Protection gets traded out. Chun-Li now a little bit vulnerable, but I think he managed to escape.
All right, beautiful kiting by Chun-Li. RubCub tried to do an all-in with the Blessing of Protection there to remove the defense, but now it's not there for Touch of Death. This likely is an ice block. Jamili has to respect the cooldowns. Immediate punish by Chun-Li. Beautiful counter engagement. Ring of Peace interrupting the crowd control of Jamili. Chun-Li just on point, showing confidence in his words earlier before the series, saying that he would only play one series today. He's looking to make sure that he is not a liar, and he's doing that justified justice here in game number 4 on match point with dampening at 13% and RubCub's mana so low. Gorecki decides to Trinket Blind. I think that's a fair trade, although he needs to be ready to be the target, but he's already ready to be the target, having talented into Renewal before the game started instead of Wild Charge. The map is too small to really benefit from Wild Charge, so Renewal is just a better pick. So if they switch to him, that's an immediate 30% heal that he can get. So in this position where he has no Glider's Medallion and Vendetta is up, I think they would like to switch to Gorecki and then pop Vendetta, and then when he gets out of the stun, he can use Renewal. So I like that adaptation in terms of talents. Gorecki's definitely thinking 2 steps ahead.
Yeah, this is nicely done by the boys. RubCub had to trade out his Divine Shield in order to save Jamili during that exchange. And now M2KC, they don't have much left to work with. There's a Vendetta. Roasties needs to try to set up his team, but Jamili could easily just fall. Crowd control with a silence over on the RubCub. That's going to fade. Paralysis comes in from Chun-Li. Jamili getting low. He still has the Cauterize, that cheat death effect, but if they can get a Gladiator's Maledict before that lands, they can completely negate that effect and just take down Jamili instantaneously. Ring of Frost tries to get cast out by Jamili, but unfortunately it misses on Gorecki, and as a result, Smexen does end up surviving. That could have been a crowd control chain that just won them the game. A little bit of a mistake there for M2KC, or just a little bit unlucky. And as a result, the boys, they might be able to survive, but Jamili, he actually sneaks in a Polymorph. Very nicely done. And Smexen's still in trouble. He's using Vampiric Embrace to heal himself up. Top off his team. Gorecki gets out of the crowd control. Smoke Bomb gets dropped out now by Roasty. This is a great attempt by M2KC. They could just win the game. Hammer of Justice comes in from RubCub. This is going to be combustion from Jamili as well. A big offensive push. If the boys can survive this, it's going to be huge. I think they have what it takes to take down Jamili after this offensive push, but they just have to hold on a little longer.
And the boys hold on. Both teams totally out of mana. It's match point for M2KC. They have to win if they want to stay in the upper bracket. Jamili's moving in for the game-winning crowd control, but gets denied. Smexon is still being pressured by Roasties. Roasties trying to close the game. Chun-Li trying to hold out with some extra Vivifies. Gorecki, he cannot afford to be Ring of Frost. They stop it with the stun. They go for a blind instead. Gorecki trinkets it, although it was a half diminishing return. I think that he still needed to. Jamili's under fire, though. There's no cooldowns for RubCub. It's match point. Jamili's pinned down. Cauterize triggered. He's on the run, trying to get back to RubCub in line of sight, but there's no mana to heal him back up with. He's going to polymorph Chun-Li in desperation. But there's still Greater Fade, there's still Ironbark, there's still so much defense. Smexon knows the game's in the bag. He's going to trink it out to just finish it. Roasties is stalling for as long as he can, but the Windwalker's cooldowns are activated. Shadow Crash is sniped out. Fists of Fury flying in from the images, and Roasties actually kills Jamili with images. Or sorry, Chun-Li kills Jamili with images while attacking Roasties. Some high-level play there from the boys, and their new composition works out.
Yeah, not only did their new composition work out, it felt like they were getting better at it throughout the series. Another clean game here coming in from the boys as they do take the series 3-1. You know, there's nothing worse than false promises, guys. Chun-Li holds true to his word. He's able to pull through with the victory, and we will see him tomorrow, just like he said he would in his tweet.
Yeah, I mean, Chun-Li, not really a person that we know to lie, so pretty nice plays from him throughout the game, and even at the end of that game he did a really good job switching his attention to RubCub, shutting down the heals, and then putting his images onto Jamili, realizing he's not going to be able to catch him anymore and just hitting Roasties. This guy was for sure playing out of his mind in this game. We see a blind onto Gorecki. We see, you know, one of the final setups here, Smexon has nothing to work with. It's just a back and forth game here, but Jamili equally low here from the pressure of Smexon and Chun-Li. He's going to go ahead and get his Cauterize active, and look at his immediate kick right there onto RubCub. And then, of course, Jamili trying to weather the storm, and as he polys Chun-Li, he pre-incapacitates RubCub. So while he's in crowd control, RubCub can't really dish out too many heals. He sends his images over onto Jamili right there, attacks Roasties, you know, trying to build up a little bit of pressure, and then, of course, Smexon with a beautiful Shadow Crash crashes down M2KC to the lower bracket.
Yeah, we're really setting up for quite an exciting summer season here. Obviously, last week we saw some of the more upsets. M2KC coming out, Never Lucky coming out. Now, both those teams have been knocked down to lower to kind of fight against each other in that brawl down there. But boys, who have been a team in spring to watch out for, came 5th last week, are now into the top 3 going into Sunday. Now we get to see if Cloud9 will be able to beat Method Orange, because that would really be the return to the spring season essentially for these teams. It was always about the boys and Cloud9, to a lesser extent Method Orange as well, but those were the 2 or 3 teams to watch out for. Now we're starting to see that situation, and I mean, the boys here, it was really nice to see, because we've been critical of a lot of teams for not having the right compositions. They had an issue last week and they resolved it in a week, and now they're looking great again.
Well, it's like you said at the beginning of the broadcast, Cloud9, the boys, these aren't teams that are going to sit idle and just lose. They're going to adapt. They're going to come up with new compositions. We have to give a lot of credit here to Smexon. He's been playing lots of different classes. He came in originally on the Death Knight. He's known as a warrior, and then he played the Fury Warrior. We've seen him on the Elemental Shaman, now a Shadow Priest, and he's really making, you know, he's really enabling his team to find this success. If they didn't have Smexon on the roster, they'd be limited to just one composition, quite frankly. So I think having him, bringing him on, and allowing him to sort of shine as a player has been really great to see.
Yeah, it's been great to watch his growth from just warrior to this kind of phenomenal multi-classer for the boys. The boys will be the first team to advance to Sunday's bracket.